So what were some of the struggles that you experienced with Life of Pi?
Well, on Life of Pi, you know, the challenge with it is that it's a film that no one's ever made before. And that's a very unusual thing. That's a really courageous thing these days. So to do something that's original and a book that everyone agrees is unfilmable means that making that film is going to have a lot of interesting moments. So November, we sat back and watched an assembly of everything, and we all agreed this didn't work. This film just didn't work, and it was a rather frightening moment. And 6 months later, we were all agreeing this film didn't work. Sit back and watch a screening, and the lights would come up at the end, and everyone just be, oh boy, like the producers would be freaking out and getting on their phones, and Aang would just be like, okay, and like you're looking at me, you've got to help me, like you got to. It literally did not work in May and June when we had the film coming out in November. So there was a great deal of recutting, of trying to figure out what is this movie really about? And Aang, you know, is the most focused and hardest working guy I have ever met. And he just was not going to let this go until he figured it out. And he worked all of us like that as well. And happily we did that because we believe in our captain, in him. And we know that he's one of the great filmmakers of our time. He's going to get it where it needs to get. But it's a frightening voyage. I mean, you're climbing up a mountain and just, you know, or a better analogy, you're adrift in an ocean and there's no land in sight. And there's so much faith. At that moment, you need faith in your director's vision. And so as a composer, you know, we work together and talk about what the music needs to do. But just to get back to your original question 10 minutes ago of why was this tough for me? Well, really, we had to figure out what the role of the music was. And there isn't another film like this that we can look and say, well, this is how it's done. Originally, I had rather a complicated score. It was a lot of the same instruments, but what we figured out over months of working is that the music, in a way, had to kind of be simpler than we thought, and kind of carry the audience in a smooth way from beginning to end. There's so much to kind of absorb and feel on the screen that musically we had to help and not hinder that. And if the music got too intellectual and less about emotion, people just weren't feeling it. So because it's what you're watching on screen is such a stretch of the imagination already, the music had to be very compassionate with the audience. So that's something it took a long time to figure out. And of course, in hindsight, it seems obvious, but all things do, I guess. But generally, you think, okay, we need a theme. You know, Pi needs a theme. So his theme has to be able to work from when he's a little innocent boy, happily safe in his mother's arms in India, and also as a man after going through this horrific experience of watching his family die in front of him and being in another country. So a theme like so your theme has to have a boyishness, have joy, have a kind of, he's young, it's got to have youth to it, but he's also he's a very deep thinker for a kid. So it's got to be able to have that inside it. So it's got to have an Indian flavor as well. So that's kind of how you figure it out. You think, okay, and this would be the discussion we'd be having with the director. Mm-hmm. So Aang and I would say, yeah, here's the qualities it has to have. Okay, now then, so that's one theme. And then you start writing it, and then it has to work not only here, but it's got to work here in the movie. And sometimes you write a great theme, yeah, this is amazing as he's a kid, And then you'd look at it later and go, yeah, it doesn't work here. Okay, start again. Or, yeah, it could work here if we changed this about it. So it's just constantly fiddling and adjusting and tweaking and
And then I
taking
guess
this out.
as the movie's being filmed, then you get better visuals and you're able to
Well,
tweak it a bit more.
And to make it more complicated, the film changes as you're doing that. Because you might think at the beginning that the film is about survival, let's say. But actually, by the time they're finished, the film is about, something else. It's about memory and enlightenment and things like that. So it's got a whole different heart to it. So therefore, yeah, if you start too early as a composer, you can really kind of wrong foot yourself by thinking that you're talking about, thinking about the core of the movie is this, when in fact it's changing, and by the time the film is finished, it's over here. And then what you wrote for this just doesn't work for this, and you literally have to throw it away and start again, So, yeah, it is a very, it's a long and laborious process of bringing something to life that has to feel like it's just entwined in the movie in a completely real and natural way.